say hello and have a chat. I'd like that. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to present our two Orion guests today, Pablo Felices-Luna and Sara Topham. Please give them a round of applause.
Shall we bow?
So if you know what it's like to run a theater company or be a professional performer like Sara, you would know how busy your schedule would be, right? So we are so grateful that they actually made the time in their very busy schedule to come and be with us for those 4 days. They're going to be here for 3 days, but they've got travel between those two. And so I just want to say thank you for making the time. And thank you for coming back to your alma mater.
Yeah.
Yes. They'll tell you a little bit more about that, but they were both in this program as students, and their friendship now has lasted 30 years. So this is impressive. I'd like to introduce both of them, and then they each have a talk, and then at the very end, Rachel Gaitor, who's the instructor for Theater 103, will facilitate the Q&A. Pablo Felices-Luna was born and raised in Peru and came to Canada more than 30 years ago to pursue a career in theater. He has been the artistic director of Manitoba Theatre for young people since 2014, where he has supported the creation of new works by this beloved organization and shared outstanding work by guest companies from across Canada and the world. Prior to coming to Winnipeg, he was the artistic director of Carousel Players for 8 years, where he directed 15 productions and worked with 9 different playwrights to premiere 7 new plays. Pablo and his wife Carrie are partners in the adventure of raising their audacious children, Emma, Alejandra, and Isabel. Sara Topham. Sara Topham was born in Victoria, where she attended Oak Bay High School, studied ballet with Sheila McKinnon at the Wing Shaw Dance Studio, and eventually undertook her theater training at UVic. Since graduating from the Phoenix, Sara's career has taken her to stages all over the world. Highlights include Broadway revivals of The Importance of Being Earnest, where she played Gwendolyn, Travesty, where she played Cecily, and playing Sally in the original Broadway company of Tom Stoppard's Leopoldstadt. 15 seasons at the Stratford Festival of Canada, playing roles including Hedda Gabler, Shakespeare's Juliet, Rosalind, Olivia, Cordelia, Jessica, Diana, and Princess Catherine, Princess Elizabeth, Robin and Elizabeth, Ruth in Blight Spirit, Wendy in Peter Pan, and Madame de Tourvel in Dangerous Liaison, Gwendolyn in The Importance of Being Earnest, Laurentia in Puente
Ovejuna.
Thank you.
I should have let you say it.
An Ideal Husband, Laura in The Glass Menagerie, Grace in London Assurance, Brooke Ashton in Noises Off, Cassandra in Agamemnon.
And that's all we have time for, hosts. I hope you enjoyed it. You don't have to keep going.
And this was only half of her bio. Yes.
I didn't think you were going to read it out loud. It's always so shocking when it comes at you like that.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for being here, and we're really excited to hear you talk.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Yasmin.
Okay, here we go. 7 lessons young audiences have taught me in 25 minutes or less. Buckle up. So, just after the bio, I do want to say a little bit. You should know what Manitoba Theatre for Young People is. It's the 2nd largest TYA company in English Canada. We also have the first purpose-built facility for work for young audiences, which means the theatre was built from the ground up to do this work. It has a 300-seat reconfigurable theatre, so we can do thrust in the round, proscenium. And we're in the middle of a $9 million capital campaign. We're about $90,000 of our goal to fix the building in a number of places. And one of the things we're doing is we're putting a 100-seat black box theater for smaller, more intimate work. I've got some colleagues here who would understand that I've been called a lifer meaning I came into the work for young audiences very early in my career, and I have stayed and have no real intentions of leaving it because I love it. And I'm here to tell you why. I came to Canada in 1988, and it was a fascinating time. I actually came here through Victoria. I went to Pearson College down in Metchosin, and just to give you a quick few hits, that year in '88 there was 7,000% inflation in Peru. So the inflation we have lived through the last couple of years, peanuts. It was also the first year that the college accepted students from the Soviet Union. And I became very close friends with Ludmila Tabachikova. We called her Lucy. And after her first year, she was not allowed to return because there was fear that she was becoming too westernized. And interestingly enough, for those of you who understand sort of where this place is in history, it was during that second year that the Berlin Wall fell and the world changed. I was also roommates with a white South African student, Nick, and in my second year in the college, I got to watch Nick and Audrey, who was a black South African refugee living in Kenya, address the student body, much like I'm addressing you right now, to announce that Nelson Mandela had been freed from prison. So why am I telling you this? You can imagine you've got a 15-year-old artist in this place where people are so socially engaged and so active, and many of the graduates from that school have gone on to work for NGOs and for UNICEF, and they're very engaged in world affairs. And I had no place. I was lost. I knew I wanted to affect some change in the world, but as an artist, I just kept feeling like, what am I doing here? Also, come on. These two things that I wanted in my life, to make great change in the world and to be an artist, would not actually be reconciled until I found the work for young audiences. I had a real opportunity to dive very deeply into it, and I don't have the time to share what my first 6 months are like, but if we talk at any point, I'll share some stories with you. But I can tell you that it changed completely my outlook of what this work was. I came into it with the same preconceptions that I bet you most of you have. You know, let me tell you, it's not Dora the Explorer, okay? It's not big head theater. It's not bright colors and nothing else. By actually understanding what the work was, I started to realize that there was a place for me in this work. Because one of my mentors, actually, I stole that quote from him, Richard Greenblatt, says that theater for young audiences is the only true form of political theater. Because political theater usually is preaching to the converted. It's saying something about the world, and all the people, right? All the people in the room go, yes, we agree, right? But when you're working with children, with young people, who actually don't have a set view of the world yet, who are just trying to figure it all out, who are developing their own moral compasses, that's when you can actually engage in meaningful conversation about the world, and that's where you can actually affect change. The other thing is that in theater for young audiences, we are not bound by form. You rarely see a box set in theater for young audiences, because you're going to see clown, you're going to see movement theater, you're going to see dance, you're going to see historical dramas, you're going to see imaginative pieces. Like it just ranges in ways that you can't even, don't have the time to tell you about. However, the work does come with what I call pervasive narratives. I'm not going to dwell much in number one, because I will tell you right now, it's not easier. And I hope that over the course of this chat, as I tell you some stories, you'll go, oh, I think I know what he meant by that. The second thing about children being incapable of complexity is actually a reflection of how society views children and young people. Like, they're incomplete humans. They're humans in training, right? The thing that I get the most in my work is like a really well-meaning, like, the work you do is so important, because you're growing the audiences of the future, right? Like, my job is to actually create audiences for the Belfry and for the Stratford Festival, for all of these regional theaters that do important work. But you see the fallacy? Like, do you hear it? Those children, those young people are going to the theater now. They're audiences now. They're not audiences in the future. So our work is to make that experience sublime for them. There's a thing that I like to do in the work, and it's like we do talkbacks whenever we do a show in a school. And that's because children really want to talk about the show. But it's also because in my years of touring, I would always watch a teacher on the sidelines watching the play, and they'd be like, what were they thinking? This is going right over their heads. This is too complicated. And then in the talkback, what we try to do is we try to expose how wrong they are. Because then you hear the kiddos and how much they get from it and how much they have to say about it. And that same teacher shifts from, what were they thinking, to, oh, my kids are smart. The trap is that because the work is delivered a lot in schools or by bringing schools to the work, that there's this idea, that's the third problem, that people think that it's all educational and pedagogical, and that the only value of the work is the lesson in the work. I will tell you, any play that you can reduce to a simple, like, one-sentence lesson is not a very good play. So I'm not interested in what the lesson in the work is. I'm more interested in the lessons that this audience has to teach me. Which gets us back to the 7. Please do read. You only get 4 because we have a time limit. So out of the 7, I'm going to give you 4. The Story of the Little Gentleman in 1999. It's a Danish play. I will tell you the entire plot of the play right now. There is a little gentleman. He is sad. He goes to the park. He meets a dog. He brings the dog home. They have tea. They go back to the park. They meet a girl. That's the play. But it is done with a string quartet underscoring everything's to music, and it's one of the most moving pieces of theater you could think of. So the story goes that the director is telling the actor playing the little gentleman in rehearsals, I don't know, I think you're faking it. I don't think they're going to buy it. And the actor is justifiably saying things like, well, but what do you expect me to do? There's no action, like I'm not supposed to play emotion, I'm supposed to play action, and the action leads to emotion, and I don't know, like, what do you want me to do? Well, first show, actor walks on stage, being sad, and a 5-year-old goes, you're not sad. Yeah. You're not really sad. You're not sad. You're not sad. Maybe because like 20 plus years of craft and training and hard work were being challenged by a 5-year-old, this actor became genuinely sad. And the kid stopped. Because the truth is powerful. The truth is what we need. The truth is everything. So let's move forward in time. Now we're in 2008. I'm directing this show called The Big League. It's about a 12-year-old who loves hockey and is trying to make a hockey team, and his dad, who's pushing him very hard to that point where it's no longer fun. The play is very cool. It's done in rollerblades. This is a touring show. It goes into gyms. So it packs up, and this happens in many different spaces. So there's a moment late in the play where Tommy, the protagonist, is in a tryout, and he winds up for the shot. And then he spins out of it in his rollerblades and faces the audience and goes, this is it. This is the moment. All I have to do is put the puck in the net, and I'll make the team, and my dad... You can see where the play goes there, right? It's very theatrical. The actor really loved that moment, like really, really loved that moment. So he would, spin out of it, and like feel it, try to find it. This is it, right? So I'm talking to a playwright who says, I'm interested in work for young audiences. I've never done it. I'd love to talk to you. And I said, why don't you come see the show? So we go into a school gym, and the show's happening, and that's a day when Jeff decides to really feel it. And as he's, feeling it, 300 kids start screaming, shoot! Shoot the puck! Shoot it! Shoot it now! You can't fight 300 screaming children. That beautiful monologue was never heard in that performance. Right? So we actually use it in our work now. I don't ever talk about pace. I don't say pick up your cues. I don't say can we move from this to that a little more efficiently. I just tell the story and I say shoot the puck. Because the learning in it is that you can't let the audience get ahead of you. You actually need to stay a beat ahead of them. And if you do, you lose them. This was Water Under the Bridge. We were living in St. Catharines. We're coming up on the bicentennial of the War of 1812, and there were lots of celebrations about, this great war that Canada won against the United States. Insert topical joke. And it was a really negative narrative that was happening around, like, let's glorify war and fighting and killing. So a couple of playwrights, Michaela Washburn and Carrie Costello, who's sitting right there, decided to write a play that would subvert that. And it was a play of friendship of two kiddos, one who was Indigenous and one who was settler, who lived across the river from each other and who are suddenly told by someone that they can no longer be friends because there's a war happening. So the play is trying to unpack some of these really complicated ideas for 5 to 10-year-olds. The kiddo there on this side is our oldest daughter, who is now in grade 12 and about to go into theater school. She'd been immersed in this play from the start of it and understood what the play was about and what it was trying to do. But 2 days before opening, she walks into our house and says, Mama, Papa, there was a thing at school about the War of 1812. And we said, okay, great. What did you get from that? Oh, if the Americans come, we should get our guns and kill them. Because this presentation had not been careful in what it said and how it said it, and had created the impression that the war was still going on. And its message was, well, if the Americans come, get your guns and kill them. I don't know how many musical theater lovers are in this room, but Stephen Sondheim, Into the Woods, children will listen. Careful what you say to them. Power of Harriet T, the story of Harriet Tubman, told with two actors, both of whom play Harriet, two musicians, and the musicians were underscoring everything, and then at times, as you can see in that photo, would jump into the action. The show had been on tour for a long time in gyms, and I went to see it. And during the talkback, a kiddo puts up their hand and goes, so, was she like a zombie or something? And you felt the actors like just get defensive and react like, oh, this kid's being difficult. They're trying to be smart. They're trying to, make us look bad. And I talked to them afterwards and I said, oh, no. Listen to the note. There was a really good note there. Because there was a moment in the play where Harriet talks about leading a group of escapees. This is about the Underground Railroad, freed slaves, trying to get them up north. And her mouth becomes infected. And what she says, I took the butt of my gun and I used it to knock my teeth out. And it was done, stylized. She would turn, and there was a very specific movement, and it was synced with a live sound that was being done, and the text was crisp and clear. But over the course of doing the play over and over again, it had gotten soft. the sound didn't line up with the action wasn't clear, the text wasn't clear. So the kiddo thought that Harriet had shot herself in the mouth. And the only way they could understand it was that she kept going because she was like a zombie or something. So hear the notes. I always say to actors, listen with an open heart. When they talk to you, they're telling you something. And now, if you think that these are all great lessons that Pablo learned, like a decade ago, these are lessons that you keep learning over and over again. Because just this past November, Sara and I directed a production of A Year with Frog and Toad at MTYP. And there's a great scene where they bake cookies. It's a play about friendship and celebration, and it's a whole number about delicious cookies. And my 10-year-old kiddo comes home and says that, she loved the show. And then she says, but Papa, Toad left a batch of cookies in the oven. And I said, I had the same reaction, right? I went oh, you're being a brat. You're a theater kid who picks up on things that nobody ever picks up on. Well, we also ask kiddos to write Toad some postcards because Toad doesn't get any letters. Dear Toad, I hope you get your clock fixed. We don't want your cookies to burn. Hope this letter doesn't take too long to get to you. Merry Christmas. Hello, Toad. I heard you haven't been getting any mail. Also, you forgot a batch of cookies in your ovens. Bye-bye. Toad, your cookies are still in the oven. What happened to the second batch of cookies? I can't get away with anything. But listen, right? Because you bet the next time we work on A Year with Frog and Toad, a second batch of cookies will not be left in the oven. The slide says it all. So, great, some stories. How does this apply to the work that I want to do? This is the tale of how Sara and I found ourselves making a play. So it's 2017, and there's a new adaptation of A Charlie Brown Christmas that has come out. And it's basically a line-by-line version of the half-hour beloved holiday special that many people grew up with. I didn't. And theaters across the country are trying to figure out, what are we going to do with this play? Because it's only 30 minutes. So people are doing things like, let's do a sing-along attached to it. Let's do this, let's do that. Because, again, I didn't revere this special, and I had a different relationship to it. I went, there's another Charlie Brown play, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. Personal opinion, I don't love it. It's just vignettes, it's chaotic, there's so much noise. But I thought, would they let me pull 45 minutes from You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown and maybe build a first act that sets up why Charlie can't get into the holiday spirit at the top of Act 2? And there's a great saying in Spanish, a baby that doesn't cry doesn't get fed. You won't know until you ask. So I asked, and they said, sure, go ahead and do it. So all of a sudden, I found myself about to direct this thing, this monstrosity, this Frankenstein thing that we had put together, and also directing my first musical. I had never directed a musical. So what do you do in those situations? You turn to the people who know better that you love. And I called Sara and I said, Sara, please come help me. The other thing that I knew is that I did not want, for those of you who know the special, at the end when Charlie's friends decorate the sad little tree, he arrives and goes, what's going on? And they'll go, Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown. And I thought, that's going to be awful on stage. So we weaved a participation contract, a participation contract from the beginning of the play. So that throughout the play, kiddos from the audience were called to help in various ways. And in that final moment, the actors would actually pull kiddos from the audience and get them to decorate the tree. And then when Charlie came back, they would wish Charlie Brown a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, whatever it is that their family celebrated. It's beautiful, really touching. But we needed an actor who could stand there and take all of that love and still move the play forward. So the other thing we knew is that we wanted a Peter Fernandez to play Charlie Brown, and you see Peter there, and if you ever have the good chance of working with Peter, you'll see what I mean. So here's what happens. So you have this beautiful moment where the kiddos give this gift to Charlie. And then the next thing that happens is you're supposed to start singing, "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." And Peter would sing the first line of this song, and he played it as a question. He asked the question, "Am I loved?" When he sang, "Hark the herald angels sing," he was asking all the people around him, "Do you love me?" So I want to bring it back to the 4 stories now. In rehearsals, we listened with an open heart. We brought kiddos into the room to rehearse that section of the play to see what they had to say to us. We trusted them to listen to this question that Peter was asking. And Peter did not indulge in the beautiful feeling of the moment. He just shot the puck. And most importantly, because the question shared a very deep truth about himself, they answered. And on the first show, as he sang that line, 300 kiddos sang back to him. And that was magic that I have never experienced in theater before. And it happened throughout the run, where impromptu, people in the audience would go, "Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown. We love you, Charlie Brown." So I started, and I'm going to end with the truth. And the reason I love working with Sara is because I've been in many rooms where the truth will be sacrificed for a laugh, will be sacrificed for time, for production needs. And we know that we will sacrifice everything for the truth, because the truth is powerful. And that is a lesson that I learned 25 years ago from a 5-year-old.
I'm so old school, I need a printed script. Absolute creative companionship is a very rare thing. It is fashionable these days to talk about shared values, but it is rare for those shared values to be more than statements of ideas that people think sound like things we should be striving for. True shared values are not easy to agree on, and in my experience, are rarely arrived at through discussion. Our shared values have been arrived at by the doing of the work together. Through that doing, over 30 years, but more specifically in the rehearsal hall, 7 years, and several productions, we've arrived at, for example, best idea wins. Lack of preparation doesn't make you organic, it makes you unprepared. Conflict is not necessarily a crisis. It is often a necessary part of creativity. And as Pablo has already proffered, a passionate valuing of the truth above all. The great actor Brian Bedford, whom some of you may remember from childhood viewings of the Walt Disney version of Robin Hood with the little foxes, he was the voice of Robin Hood, Oodalali. He was an extraordinary director of comedy. I worked with him many times at Stratford, and in 2011, we played mother and daughter in the Broadway revival of The Importance of Being Earnest, which he directed and starred in. Heading towards opening night, one of the actors had become so focused on being hilarious that he was completely untethered from the play. He was tenacious in his dedication to being funny at the expense of everything else. to the point where Brian, in a note session after a preview performance, finally exclaimed, "Darling boy, you can do that, and the audience will laugh, but it's not good for the character, and it's not good for the play, so please don't do it." It wasn't the first time I had been aware that doing something just for a laugh was detrimental to the play. But it was the first time I'd heard it articulated in such a clear way. It immediately led me to examine the difference between, say, Brian's work and the work of this other actor. It wasn't that Brian wasn't funny. He was. He was, in fact, side-splittingly roll in the aisles funny. Over time, I distilled the difference down to this. Brian's brand of funny was connected to the play, rooted in character, and the situation. The other actors wasn't. In short, Brian was connected to the truth. The truth which we were striving for in Charlie Brown had nothing to do with Charlie Brown. It was and is a theatrical truth, which is the same whether you are doing Charlie Brown or Romeo and Juliet or Noises Off or Hedda Gabler or St. Joan or The Importance of Being Earnest or a scene in an acting class at the University of Victoria. It is impossible to describe or to manufacture, but it is undeniable, and it changes the air in the room, whether that room is at the Manitoba Theatre for Young People, or the Stratford Festival, or the Shaw Festival, or Broadway, or the University of Victoria. That truth and the challenging quest for it is why it took every experience in my career to prepare me to do the work that we did with that company on Charlie Brown. The truthful work, which made the space for that moment we all shared, when the children lifted their voices in song to answer Charlie's question. Pablo has shared with you these 4 lessons. Don't look at me, I'm gonna cry. Pablo has shared with you these 4 lessons from his work in theater for young audiences because they are key to the making of all theater. They are just easier to learn from young audiences because children are less worried about being impolite than their grown-up counterparts. The thing I want to speak to you about today is what to do with those lessons and how to apply them in the service of making all theater. And although there may be people here who are not involved in the doing part of theater, I remember how all too well how desperate I was at the Phoenix for someone to come from the outside world and tell me the truth about the profession I was longing to enter. And so I'm a little bit focused on them today. It is my hope that for the rest of you, the curiosity that brought you here will allow you to enjoy my offering, even if what I'm talking about is occasionally outside your specific realm of experience. I hope that your involvement as a future audience member may be enriched by spending this time together. And after all, the audience, whether they are 6 or 96, is who we are making theater for. So, in support of Pablo's 4 lessons, I now share 4 truths. Truth 1, the desire for certainty is in your way. Before I arrived at the Phoenix, I started my performing life as a ballet dancer. This was one of the challenges I faced because for all the skills I had acquired, which were and continue to be enormously valuable, I was also burdened with an approach to the work which limited my ability as an actor. The hard-won technique I had acquired of overcoming physics and being more comfortable on the tips of my toes than my bare feet, which allowed me to find freedom as a dancer, meant that I always thought I had to be one step ahead of the scene, that I had to know where I was going. I once heard the legendary Canadian figure skater Kurt Browning commentating at the Olympics. He was describing the important elements necessary to successfully land a jump. The most important thing, he said, is that you have to go into the jump with the memory of the landing already in your body, otherwise you're lost. I remember thinking that he had just articulated the most important distinction between acting and dancing. In acting, if you go into the moment with the memory of the landing already in your body, that's when you're lost. Because live performance is by its very nature risky. Anything could happen. That's what makes it unique. It's why the audience loves it when something goes wrong. It reminds them they're part of something that's not inevitable, something that exists here and now and for them alone. For a dancer, that risk is visible in their engagement with physics. For actors, that risk is inside them and between them. The driving energy of the theater is the energy of what if. You can get it if the set falls over, but you can get it much more professionally and consistently if you work towards it on a deeper level. During previews for the Broadway premiere of Leopoldstadt, Tom Stoppard was asked by the director if he had any notes for the assembled company. Tom looked at us and said, "In general, the word if is not being said loudly enough in this production." He wasn't really talking about volume. He was talking about our investment in the spirit of that word. If makes anything possible. One of the things I observe in many of the students I'm encountering is that they feel enormous pressure and a deep desire to be certain of the outcome before they begin. Not unlike what I felt, although the source is different. For most of you, this is not the result of intense training in classical ballet, but rather of the world you are living in. A world which is sure that there are always definitive rights and wrongs, and the price of being judged to be on the wrong side of that equation is banishment forever, because all mistakes carry the same weight, and none of them are forgivable. It is a hard world to take risks in, and definitely a hard world in which to jump without knowing where and how you will land, because the consequences of landing in the wrong place are harsh and immediate and feel permanent. I understand why it feels necessary to be certain of the outcome when doing your work. But I am here to tell you that, in fact, the opposite is necessary if you want to make theater. Because the problem with the approach of trying to control the end result, the problem that I've spent 20 years working on for myself, is that certainty about the outcome isn't truthful. Because we all know that in life, things rarely turn out how we think they're going to. The human experience is one where nothing is certain, as the old adage goes, except for death and taxes. And yet a great director I worked with once said to me, "The hardest thing about being an actor is everything is written down." In a play, we do know the outcome insofar as it is defined by the words on the page. So if the very nature of our creative act requires not knowing, what do we do about that? And more importantly, how do we do it? It will possibly be disappointing for some of you to hear me say that it requires an enormous amount of preparation, but it's true. And there are no shortcuts or magic pills that can make it easier or faster. It is hard and rewarding and tedious and interesting and required, and it begins with curiosity. Truth two, curiosity creates communication. During my time here at the Phoenix, I was never afraid of preparation, but I was misguided about its purpose. It took me a long time to learn that preparation or rehearsal for an actor is not about getting it right or how you're going to do it. There's a quote I love. "Of the 1,000 experiences we have, we find language for one at most, and even this one merely by chance and without the care it deserves." The actor has the opposite challenge. We have the language, painstakingly crafted and given to us by the playwright, and it's our job to create the experience that lies underneath it. I'm going to show you what I mean. Who here had a pet growing up? Right on the end. Will you tell me what kind of animal your pet was?
I had a Dalmatian.
Thurber. Tell me the Dalmatian's name again.
Thurber.
Okay. Do you see how we know everything we need to know about Thurber by the way she said Thurber's name? Right? What about someone else? Who else had a pet? Sam?
Yeah, I had a dog named Cookie.
See? Cookie and Thurber are very different. And now we all know that. That's the kind of connection we're always trying to make with the language that we're going to share in the play. I'm going to give you a tiny example of the how of that. This is for the students, but anyone else is welcome to participate. There's a famous line in Twelfth Night. Make me a willow cabin at your gate, says Viola to Olivia. Close your eyes and picture that willow cabin in your mind's eye. What color is it? And now, oh, the phone's ringing in the willow cabin. And now, ask yourself, if that willow cabin was a smell, what would that smell be? And now, ask yourself, if that willow cabin was a sound, what would that sound be? And now, ask yourself, if that willow cabin had a taste, if I could take a bite out of it, what would it taste like? And now, ask yourself, if I could run my fingers along the willow cabin, what would it feel like underneath them? Make me a willow cabin at your gate. That's one of the ways in which we can attach meaning to the words that have been given to us. We're going to do a lot of that this week, acting students. And for the rest of you, now when you come to see the University of Victoria's production of Twelfth Night and you hear that line, you will all have a connection to it that's your very own. Once you've done all your preparation, the truest challenge and what separates the excellent actor from the serviceable one is for you to continue to discover that connection inside yourself anew each and every time you speak the text. Because what we are aiming for with every word is to open the place in the listener that is connected to that word. Not so that they experience what we experience, but so that they can have their own experience. I once had a student say to me when I was being demanding with them about this concept of discovering it anew every time, yeah, but I've already done it like 5 times today, so you can't mean like every time. To which I responded, do you understand that's like a singer saying she already sang it in tune 5 times today, so surely she doesn't have to sing it in tune every time? You do. It has to be done every time. A great movement teacher of mine talks about discoveries, not decisions. And the reason this is such an important part of what I'm going to work with you on this week is that decisions in the context of theater can become certainties. And certainty is toxic for creativity because it kills curiosity. And curiosity is the magic ingredient to all great communication. We all know the difference between being in a classroom where someone is simply relaying to us stuff they already know, and a classroom where the person's engagement with that material allows them to rediscover their love for it in the act of transmitting it to you. I know which classroom I would rather be in. My husband used to be an elementary school teacher, and he had a real commitment to making sure the kids were connected to math. And he once overheard a group of little girls talking, and one of them said to the other, sometimes when Mr. Aarons is talking about math, he gets so excited about the numbers, I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. That's the kind of creativity that we are trying to open up for the audience. It's that kind of space of creativity and curiosity, which was opened by the actor playing Charlie Brown, that allowed the children to collectively feel impelled to contribute to answering his question. Truth 3, humility is endless. Pablo shared with you a beautiful and humbling experience with the batch of cookies and Frog and Toad. Between us, we have some 50 years of professional experience. We've worked in theaters all over the country and with directors from all over the world. We have worked on Frog and Toad together twice and have been thinking about it over the course of 5 years. We have argued and collaborated and shared aha moments over every detail of that play, and yet it never occurred to us that the second batch of cookies in our production would be overcooked, nay, burnt to a crisp. But we know now because we've listened to the children. Alas, too late for that production, but I have a solve for next time. Thank God for humility. Humility matters because learning takes time. It's an ever-evolving cumulative process if you allow it to be. The great cellist Pablo Casals was once asked at the age of 81 why he was still practicing 4 to 5 hours a day. To which he replied, "Oh, because I think I'm making progress." One of my great mentors, a man named Bernard Hopkins, who I met in 2000, used to say to me all the time, "Take the pressure out." The pressure he was talking about was connected to so many things. How much I cared, how much I wanted to be good, how much I was afraid I wasn't enough, how much I believed that I had something to prove, what I thought acting should look like, sound like, feel like. And of course I listened to him and tried to do as he said. But somewhere in the back of my brain was a voice saying, yeah, but it can't mean all the pressure. If I take out all the pressure, how will I be able to do my acting? Bernard died in 2014. And in 2017, I was playing St. Joan at the Shaw Festival and under a lot of pressure. At the first preview, I was so scared I could hardly stand up. So I made a deal with myself that I didn't have to do any acting. I just had to get on the stage and say the words in the right order and trust Joan to do the rest, which she did. She arrived in full force and took over, which was a massive relief. I could stop trying to do it on my own. When I exited the first scene down the set of stairs into the trap room, I stood for a moment in the dark under the stage and looked up. And I said, "Oh, you meant all the pressure." I could almost hear Bernard's sigh of relief. It had taken me years to begin to understand what he was trying to teach me. And I only stumbled onto the real truth of it by accident. Continuing to learn that lesson meant that I was often faced with a binary choice. In the event that I felt insecure about my work and that the thought, "I'm not sure my acting's very good today," entered my head in the middle of a scene, which happened and happens all the time, I could choose one of two paths. I could do what I'd always done before and try to make myself feel more certain, which mostly meant just doing what I was currently doing with more, you guessed it, pressure. Or I could allow the truth of what I was feeling to be a part of my acting, instead of trying to lift myself out of it and do the work of acting from there. I committed to that second option. I would stay in the uncertainty and insecurity when it arose instead of trying to get it to go away. And the result of that was that I began to understand that perhaps it was part of my job to allow Joan to be scared and uncertain as well, to give her the chance to jump without being certain where she would land, which was most definitely the experience of the historical Joan. Doing this made my acting better. The difference between my work as a young actor, and in fact your work as young actors, and the work I do now, lives not in the difference of what we are doing. If we're doing it vaguely well, we're all basically doing the same thing. The difference is in the place I do it from. I'm more and more able to stay in the difficult and uncertain place and work from there. And if you begin to approach your work that way, which I hope I can support you in this week, you will eventually be more able to work from there too. And that's what makes the difference between the audience feeling that you are not really sad and them connecting with the journey of the character, whether the character is the little gentleman or St. Joan. I will be honest with you. It is hard. It is much harder than doing it from certainty and pressure, and it's incredibly vulnerable. It's uncomfortable. But the audience knows. They know, just as those children did, whether you are being brave enough to be vulnerable. And their experience in the theater is dependent on you continuing to build that capacity for vulnerability and discomfort. I encourage you to focus on that in your work, to embrace the paradox that feeling good and doing good work are often unrelated to each other. When you get the same note over and over, when you are frustrated because you think to yourself, I've already learned that lesson, just know you're not alone. Every great artist, everyone you work with has bumped up against that at some point in their life. The thing they are working on and will be working on forever. And then I beg you to make friends with that thing, whatever it is for you, because you will be in relationship with it for the rest of your life. Humility is endless. Some things you will be working on forever. And that is why talent is not enough. And why, as my beloved Shakespeare says, ambition should be made of sterner stuff. There are so many elements which have made up my capacity or Pablo's capacity to make a living in this art. I was by no means the most talented in my class here at the Phoenix. But what I had that really only came to light once I encountered the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune in the professional world was a willingness to always do or learn the next hard thing. And I can assure you, as Pablo can, there is always a next hard thing. It is how you engage with that reality which determines whether you will build a craft and a career. Truth 4, courage is a practice. One of the former chairs of the board of directors of the Stratford Festival, who is a renowned psychiatrist, once said to me, after he'd seen me play a particularly emotionally harrowing role, "It seems to me that you spend your life running towards the things the rest of us are running away from." The necessity of running towards those things instead of away is why courage is an important part of this work. The courage to do your work will not magically appear. You have to cultivate it, nurture it, practice it. Every time you engage in your work, you have the opportunity to be brave. You cannot wait for the big moments to come and expect your courage to arrive in the wings seconds before you step on the stage. You have to exercise it constantly, humbly, curiously. The practice of courage looks different for everyone. No one can give you that knowledge. You have to discover it for yourself. And you can never presume to know what courage looks like for anyone else. Often it is radically different for each artist. I am afraid about 75% of the time when I'm acting. And the other 25% of the time, I'm just too busy to remember that I'm afraid. But I'm working all the time, every day, on how I'm going to practice my courage in each moment, because it is a practice. And do not think that by exercising your courage, you can excise your fear. They go hand in hand. But I want to promise you something. Your fear, being afraid, does not mean that you aren't talented. It doesn't mean that you are inadequate or unskilled. It means you care. It means you have the opportunity to be brave. So get to know your fear. Notice what you do to try and block it, and maybe next time, don't. See what you can learn by just letting it exist, by finding a way for fear, and therefore courage, to be a part of your creativity. One afternoon after a matinee of St. Joan, the artistic director of the Shaw Festival, who had also directed the production, happened to be at the stage door while I was speaking to some patrons who'd come round after the performance to talk to me. When I finished with them, he observed, "It's interesting. They didn't really want to talk to you. They wanted to talk to Joan." That doesn't happen at the opera or the ballet or a concert. There, people want to talk to the performer, not the character. What's the difference? I'd never considered the question before, but I instantly knew what the answer was. When an audience hears a high C or sees a dozen pirouettes, they know that they are witnessing something superhuman, and there's a primal sense of the risk involved, and therefore the courage required to do such a thing. But because what we do is human scale, the courage is invisible. Those audience members knew they'd witnessed courage, but it never occurred to them it was mine. For them, it was all St. Joan, and that's what they came for. They come to the theater to be in communion with characters who are braver than they are. For the actor playing Charlie Brown, that "Hark the Herald Angels" moment was a real challenge. He resisted singing from that place of uncertainty because it was deeply exposed and uncomfortable, because he didn't know how his voice would sound. We didn't set which of the other actors would join in the song first or how. We asked them to hear the question and simply respond in the moment. We wanted Charlie to stay open to the possibility that when he asked the question, "Am I loved?" that there might be no answer. It's the hardest question in the human experience, and we were asking him to jump into it 10 times a week without knowing where he would land. We encouraged him to let go of worrying about how the song would come out of his mouth and be open to discovering how it would come out of his being. And he did. In any production of Charlie Brown, the audience will clap at the end. But without the actor's willingness to stay truthful, stay uncertain, stay curious, stay humble, and stay brave, they will never sing. And that is a truth I have learned because of the working companionship of my dear colleague and friend, the theater we have made together, and the young audiences he has gifted me with. I hope you will all be so fortunate. Thanks.